All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Diverge Media. It's a pop-up live show today. So obviously, if you've been following the work, I said, who's ready for some hard-hitting investigative journalism today? And my goodness, I didn't expect to find what I found. I've just scratched the surface, but I need everybody here to share this information out. Do what you can to help get it in the hands of other people because it will be censored. So getting at it. The article released just recently today, I titled it Follow the Money, Examining the COVID-19 Ontario Science Advisory Table, a Deeper Look. So pull that up here. Currently, there are 27 members in total on the Ontario COVID-19 Science Advisory Table. 19 of them are employed in some capacity at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, which is a part of the University of Toronto, or they're attached to the University of Toronto directly. I say if the Science Advisory Table's goal is to provide unbiased and balanced points of view on our handling of COVID-19, then they have failed to do so, in my opinion. So getting into the Dalla Lana School of Public Health and the University of Toronto, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with having representation from the University of Toronto or the Dalla Lana School of Health. The issue is having 19 of the 27 panel members be tied in some way, shape, or form to the University of Toronto. That is, if your goal is to provide a balanced advisory table. Now, members on the science table with ties to U of T or the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. On the leadership team, all three members are tied to the University of Toronto or the Dalla Lana School of Public Health in some way, shape, or form. Kumar Murthy is a professor of mathematics at the University of Toronto. Beatty Sander is an associate professor and faculty co-lead at the Institute of Health Policy, which is run by the University of Toronto. And John McLaughlin is professor of epidemiology at the University of Toronto's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. Now, other members tied to U of T or Dalla Lana School of Health are listed all here. You have more prominent names that are more familiar, like Isaac Bogosh, Peter Uni, David Fistman, etc. But the whole list is there. You can go through it. And then they had a transparency statement on their website. So this is why it matters where these people come from, where and who they're representing, and where the funding is at. So when we get into the funding side of this, they have a transparency statement of the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, and it says the following. The Center of Vaccine Preventable Diseases is supported by the DLSPH, which receives funding from government, philanthropic, not-for-profit, and private sector organizations. Private sector funding sources include vaccine manufacturers. So not only are they receiving funding from vaccine manufacturers at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, they're also receiving funding from the government. So the question is, how much is that funding? What does that look like? Because maybe if 19 members are getting their funding from a program that if they speak out against the government's position, if it's from the government, that could be problematic as well. So there's that transparency statement. Now getting on to what I found interesting. In the spotlight here, we're going to get Kumar Murthy. So Kumar Murthy is on the leadership team of the Ontario COVID Science Advisory Table. Now, Mr. Murthy is got an interesting background. Not listed on his Ontario Science Table profile is the fact that he is the co-founder of two different companies, one being Prada Technologies, the other being Perfect Cloud. So he, on his University of Toronto profile, he has it listed. You can see it's all linked in here, and everything's always linked. So he's the founder of Ganita Lab, co-founder of Prada Technologies and Perfect Cloud. So I go on to do a little bit of research about Prada Technologies. So this is kind of how it goes. You find a thread, you pull. Mr. Murthy's on the leadership team and on the Ontario Science Advisory Table and is a big proponent of the advancement of technology. What do I mean by this? He, according to his science table profile, has had recent work that has expanded to mathematical modeling in social, economic, and health contexts, which includes his work on smart cities, smart villages, which received a CONAUT Global Challenges Award in 2017. Now that part, it's interesting, but so obviously he's working with smart villages, interested in advancing technology, but that's neither here nor there. Prada Technology says that they are a custom software development company that provides solutions in mobile development, and their site notes that mobile technology is becoming the center of attention nowadays and that the world is turning wireless. This is true. What is also definitively true is that consumers are spending record amounts of money and time on apps during the lockdown. For instance, according to a new report from App Annie, consumers in the third quarter downloaded 33 billion new apps globally and spent a record $28 billion in apps, up 20% year over year. They also spent more than 180 billion collective hours each month of July, August, and September 2020 using apps, an increase of 25% over a year. So I just say it can be safely assumed that lockdowns have caused an absolute boom in app development profits around the world, the same sorts of app development that Prada claims to do on their website. Now, this doesn't mean that there's a conflict, but it does mean that it draws some questions. Why wasn't this included in the science table profile? If lockdowns would seem to benefit a technology company, so would this cause Mr. Murty to have a biased point of view? And that's the question I asked. So that's just Mr. Murty before we get into the studies that are included here as a part of, we'll pull it up, but the Canadian Institute of Health Research. This is what I've been doing all day. Funding decisions database. You can see I have COVID related up here. So what we've been doing is going through and putting the name of various people and putting the words end with COVID. So the results turned are end, that name with COVID. So 4 studies for BD Sander on the team. But basically we go through each of those and sorry, everyone. Okay, I do have it up. All right, so this is getting down here. Mr. Murty is involved in the following Canadian Institute of Health Research studies. So he's involved in a study called COVID-19 Variant Network. Are healthcare workers at higher risk of COVID-19? It's a 1-year study, $100,000. Lots of other people's listed on that. Not likely much money, but again, I'm listing all of them. COVID-19 Variant Network, another 1-year study, $100,000 contribution. He's listed as the principal investigator among one other person who's also, I believe, on the science table. I haven't gotten down the entire list to explore each and every name yet. Continuing down, this is another one, 2-year study, $666,000 contribution. He is the principal investigator on. So I bring this up. These are being funded by the Canadian Institute of Health Research, which is government funding. So this is a lot of money being directly given by the government to these people. Now, the question is, if you start giving them an answer that maybe doesn't jive with what they want to hear, that maybe would make them look bad, like lockdowns weren't the right way, would they pull your funding? Would they not want to fund you? These are the questions that get asked about potential conflicts of interest. There's a lot of money from CIHR, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, going out to a lot of the members on the science table. Now, if they're to remain impartial, I would think, to be receiving money from this Canadian Institute of Health Research from the government directly may affect your ability to remain impartial, especially when we know things like Dr. Williams being caught on hot mic saying that I just say whatever they write down for me. Well, if they are getting government funding and they just say whatever they write down for me, is it because they could lose it? These are the questions that go through my mind. Continuing down here. So that's Prada. That's all the different studies. Now we go on in Spotlight BD Sanders. So she's also on the leadership team of the science table, and here's the list she's involved with. There's a COVID-19 variant network. She's involved with that study as well. 1 year, 100,000. COVID-19 variant supplement. That's a $50,000 1 year. We got another 1 year, $100,000 one for COVID-19 variant network, evaluating the differential impact of what we have done as we prioritize what to do next. We keep going down. And the last study here is another one. Scalable, customizable digital health 1 year, $311,000 from CIHR again. So a lot of money being handed out in these studies. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, lots of different people. But again, it's not easy getting funding in science. This is what we talked about on the live show. And it's tied a lot of times to what you're going to say. So if you say something that the person funding your research doesn't want you to say, you might not get funded again. And so this is the issue with having an advisory table that's receiving a bunch of funding outside of that, because it may affect their ability to be unbiased and give an impartial point of view to inform the premier. That's basically the takeaway there. So now, last but not least, in the spotlight, David Fistman. So obviously Fistman he's made waves, as it was found out he was taking money from the Elementary Teacher Federation of Ontario, ETFO, while he argued for smaller class sizes, by the way. He most recently received detention for being upset about the Science Table's decision to not advocate for regional reopening of schools, saying that we may get away with this gamble, or we may not. The Toronto Sun wrote about the potential conflict of interest, saying that in the document, Fistman claims that the reopening plan will cause illness and deaths in the community and presents smaller class sizes as one of the key mitigation measures. Fistman's Labor Board submission does not mention potential harms to kids from keeping schools closed. The call for smaller class sizes has been a key focus of union grievances both during the pandemic and the years prior to it. So honorariums paid to Fistman by vaccine companies Pfizer and AstraZeneca both paid him honorariums for attending advisory board meetings. As well, he's also got quite a bit of funding on different things. So we look at, this is a study he's involved in, population-based seroprevalence. 1-year study, $955,000 from CIHR and $50,000 from Alberta Innovates Corporation. Moving down, 2-year study, understanding, forecasting, communicating risk during the COVID-19 epidemic, $331,000 from CIHR. He's listed as the principal investigator. Then there's this one, Target Kids COVID-19 study of children and families safe return to school, work, and play. 1-year study, Public Health Agency of Canada funded it. Again, these are government institutions funding the supposed non-biased advisory table that's supposed to be giving impartial advice, receiving money from Public Health of Canada and Canadian Institute of Health Research. These are government institutions. Would that affect their ability to be impartial? I personally believe so. Financial contributions, Public Health Canada was $974,000 on that. So basically the takeaway here, I'm not insinuating that individuals are being devious if they're part of that list. What I am saying, though, is that when your finances are tied into your work, it has a way of taking away the appearance, certainly, of being unbiased, but it also has the potential to subconsciously alter how you approach your work and the overall narrative you present. So we're just getting into scratching the surface on the Ontario Science Table, and this is just one example of really how much funding and things are going in behind the scenes. But what I'd say to people is, and I say in the article, is there the motivation to take the foot off the gas when, if the urgency and severity and fear behind COVID goes away, so too likely does your funding? $250 million has been handed out in COVID-19 funding by the Canadian Institute of Health Research. $250 million. That's a lot of money on the table that was never on the table for any other sorts of studies. And all I think it needs to be seriously considered is, would it affect your ability to remain impartial, even if you wanted to be not biased? Would it affect your ability to remain impartial if you were attached to a bunch of funding from all these government-funded studies? And I think the answer is yes. Again, so the resources are all there. I can only do so much. What I recommend is share this video, share the article like crazy, but the links are there for you. Go in and start cross-referencing names with COVID and funding and seeing who's receiving funding for what reasons. I've only scratched the surface with this story, and we're not stopping. Investigative journalism is not dead. Diverge Media is part of that solution here in Canada, and we will continue to bring you the stories that matter. Now, on that topic, it is not free for me to spend my time working here. I do this full time. If you can help support us, please do so by visiting divergemedia.ca. We have merch, we have hats, we have shirts. That's our design, hand-drawn, custom shirt. That's your design. We have it in the background there. You can see it turned out great. $35 for those, $35 for the hat, and we take donations. But we're trying to make this a full-time endeavor and running out of time to do it. So if you can help support us, please do so. I'm just going to take a look through the comments here. So University of Toronto, McMaster, Sunnybrook Hospital, Mount Sinai have no record of COVID-19 virus isolation. Okay, so take a look there. But yeah, this is all I can say is you got to keep pulling out the threads and seeing what shakes out of it, and then you just follow it to its conclusion and see what it says. You can't have your bias too involved, and you have to realize some things just aren't worth pursuing, and go from there. So there's going to be a lot more coming on this week. I haven't even had time to really go into what the studies have been about or anything else. I've just scratched the surface. But again, thank you for joining us. If you can share this out, share that article out, let's make sure people understand how much funding is involved with a advisory table that is supposed to be impartial and give unbiased advice. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm Greg Staley of Diverge Media, and we'll see you next time.